back to lesson 14 of your Destination Reader sessions. Remember, keywords are in red, questions for you to answer are in blue, and writing time is in green. We're going to continue with strategy number 3, inference. Let's have a look at our vocabulary for today. Enthralled. Enthralled, which means to capture fascinated attention. Gallant. Gallant, which means to be brave or heroic. Asphalt. Asphalt, which is a black sticky substance often mixed with small stones or sand that forms a strong surface when it becomes hard. It's used for surfacing roads, roofing, or flooring. Parabola. Parabola, which is a mathematical term referring to a curve on a graph. This week, I will continue asking you questions. You're going to be looking at 1 mark, 2 mark, and 3 mark answers. Make sure you remind yourself how many marks each question is worth. Remind yourself now what answer a 1 mark, 2 mark, and 3 mark question need. Make a note of your ideas on your piece of paper or in your home learning book. Press play once you are ready to continue. Great work. I will try and remind you as much as I can as we go through the questions. Let's continue reading. We're still reading the chapter Throwing the Hammer. We're just at the bottom of page 101, and then we're going to move straight on to 102. It was pretty wonderful to be sitting there watching it all and knowing that I was the only person in the whole school who realised exactly what was going on inside the Trunchbull's pants. And I felt safe, too. I knew I couldn't be caught. Then the scratching got worse. She couldn't stop. She must have thought she had a wasp's nest down there. And then, right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, she leapt up and grabbed her bottom and rushed out of the room. Both Matilda and Lavender were enthralled. Have a think about what that word means. It was quite clear to them that they were at this moment standing in the presence of a master. Here was somebody who had brought the art of skullduggery to the highest point of perfection. Somebody, moreover, who was willing to risk the life and limb in pursuit of her calling. They gazed in wonder at this goddess, and suddenly even the boil on her nose was no longer a blemish, but a badge of courage. Your first question. What is Matilda and Lavender's opinion on Hortensia? And how do we know? For 2 marks. Say your answer out loud, and then make a note of your ideas on your piece of paper or your home learning book. Remember, your answer is going to need a point and a piece of evidence. Press play once you are ready to continue. We can infer that Matilda and Lavender view Hortensia as a role model because of the trick she has played on Miss Trunchbull. The author writes that the girls were standing in the presence of a master. I've made my main point that they view her as a role model, and I've also explained why by using a quotation. Use of the word master makes the reader think that the children are in awe of Hortensia. Let's continue. But how did she catch you that time? Lavender asked, breathless with wonder. She didn't, Hortensia said. But I got a day in the chokey just the same. Why? They both asked. The Trunchbull, Hortensia said, has a nasty habit of guessing. When she doesn't know who the culprit is, she makes a guess at it, and the trouble is she's often right. I was the prime suspect this time, because of the golden syrup job, and although I know she didn't have any proof, nothing I said made any difference. I kept shouting, "How could I have done it, Miss Trunchbull? I didn't even know you kept any spare knickers at school. I don't even know what itching powder is. I've never heard of it." But the lying didn't help me, in spite of the great performance I put on. The Trunchbull simply grabbed me by one ear and rushed me to the chokey, at the double, and threw me inside and locked the door. That was my second all-day stretch. It was absolute torture. I was spiked and cut all over when I came out. It's like a war, Matilda said, overawed. You're darn right it's like a war, Hortensia cried. We're going to stop so I can ask another question. Why does Matilda compare the situation to a war? For 2 marks. I would like you to say your answer out loud and then make a note of your ideas on your piece of paper or in your home learning book. Press play once you are ready to continue. I think that Matilda compares the situation to a war because the children and Miss Trunchbull almost like opponents. We know that the children all have to have battles for the same thing at school against Miss Trunchbull. Okay, so we know that they all battle for the same reasons against Miss Trunchbull, and therefore the battle makes the situation like a war. Well done, let's continue. And the casualties are terrific. We are the Crusaders, the gallant army fighting for our lives with hardly any weapons at all. And the Trunchbull is the Prince of Darkness, the foul serpent, the fiery dragon, with all the weapons at her command. It's a tough life. We all try to support each other. You can rely on us, Lavender said, making her height of 3 feet 2 inches stretch as tall as possible. No, I can't, Hortensia said. You're only shrimps, but you never know. We may find a use for you one day in some undercover job. Tell us just a little bit more about what she does, Matilda said. Please do. I mustn't frighten you before you've been here a week, Hortensia said. You won't, Lavender said. We may be small, but we're quite tough. Listen to this then, Hortensia said. Only yesterday, the Trunchbull caught a boy called Julius Rotwinkle eating licorice all sorts during the scripture lesson, and she simply picked him up by one arm and flung him clear out of the open classroom window. Our classroom is 1 floor up, and we saw Julius Rotwinkle go sailing out over the garden like a frisbee and landing with a thump in the middle of the lettuces. Then the Trunchbull turned to us and said, "From now on, anybody caught eating in class goes straight out the window." Did this Julius Rotwinkle break any bones? Lavender asked. Only a few, Hortensia said. You've got to remember that the Trunchbull once threw the hammer for Britain in the Olympics, so she's very proud of her right arm. What's throwing the hammer? Lavender asked. The hammer, Hortensia said, is actually a ruddy great cannonball on one end of a long bit of wire, and the thrower whisks it round and round his or her head faster and faster and then lets it go. You have to be terrifically strong. The Trunchbull will throw anything around just to keep her arm in, especially children. Good heavens, Lavender said. I once heard her say, Hortensia went on, that a large boy is about the same weight as an Olympic hammer, and therefore he's very useful for practicing with. At that point, something strange happened. The playground, which up to then had been filled with shrieks and shouting of children at play, all at once became silent as the grave. Watch out, Hortensia whispered. Matilda and Lavender glanced round and saw the gigantic figure of Miss Trunchbull advancing through the crowd of boys and girls with menacing strides. The children drew back hastily to let her through, and Her progress across the asphalt was like that of Moses going through the Red Sea when the waters parted. A formidable figure she was too, in her belted smock and green breeches. Below the knees, her calf muscles stood out like grapefruits inside her stockings. We're going to stop so I can ask a question. I would like you to find and copy the simile used by the author in the text at this point for 1 mark. Say your answer out loud and then make a note of your ideas on your piece of paper or in your home learning book. Press play once you are ready to continue. Her progress across the asphalt was like that of Moses going through the Red Sea when the waters parted. Okay, that is the simile that has been used. It compares how she walks to Moses going through the Red Sea when the waters parted. Well done if you got that one. Let's continue. Amanda Thripp, she was shouting. You, Amanda Thripp, come here. Hold your hats, Hortensia whispered. What's going to happen? Lavender whispered back. That idiot Amanda, Hortensia said, has let her long hair grow even longer during the holes, and her mother has plaited it into pigtails. Silly thing to do. Why silly? Matilda asked. If there's one thing the Trunchbull can't stand, it's pigtails, Hortensia said. Matilda and Lavender saw the giant in green breeches advancing upon a girl of about 10 who had a pair of plaited golden pigtails hanging over her shoulders. Each pigtail had a blue satin bow at the end, and it all looked very pretty. The girl wearing the pigtails, Amanda Thripp, stood quite still, watching the advancing giant, and the expression on her face was one that you might find on the face of a person who is trapped in a small field with an enraged bull, which is charging flat out towards her. The girl was glued to the spot, terror-struck, pop-eyed, quivering, knowing for certain that the day of judgment had come for her at last. Miss Trunchbull had now reached the victim and stood towering over her. I want those filthy pigtails off before you come back into school tomorrow, she barked. Chop 'em off and throw 'em in the dustbin. You understand? Amanda, paralysed with fright, managed to stutter. My mummy likes them. She plaits them for me every morning. Your mummy's a twit, the Trunchbull bellowed. She pointed a finger the size of a salami at the child's head and shouted, You look like a rat with a tail coming out of its head. My mummy thinks that I look lovely, Miss Trunchbull, Amanda stuttered, shaking like a blancmange. I don't give a tinker's toot what your mummy thinks, the Trunchbull yelled. And with that she lunged forward and grabbed hold of Amanda's pigtails in her right fist and lifted the girl clear off the ground. Then she started swinging her round and round her head, faster and faster, and Amanda was screaming, blue murder, and the Trunchbull was yelling, I'll give you pigtails, you little rat. We're going to stop again. Amanda Thripp is scared of Miss Trunchbull. Do you agree? For 2 marks. I would like you to say your answer out loud and then make a note of your ideas on your piece of paper or in your home learning book. Press play once you are ready to continue. I agree that Amanda Thripp is scared of Miss Trunchbull because she was so unkind to Amanda. The text describes Amanda as glued to the spot, terror-struck, pop-eyed, and quivering, which all show that she is terrified. I've used my main point that I agree that she is scared, and then I've backed up my answer with evidence using direct quotation from the text. Well done if you did the same. Let's finish off the rest of our chapter. Shades of the Olympics, Hortensia murmured. She's getting up speed now, just like she does with the hammer. 10-1, she's going to throw her. And now the Trunchbull was leaning back against the weight of the whirling girl and pivoting expertly on her toes, spinning round and round, and soon Amanda Thripp was travelling so fast she became a blur. And suddenly, with a mighty grunt, the Trunchbull let go of the pigtails, and Amanda went sailing like a rocket right over the wire fence of the playground and high up into the sky. "Well thrown, sir," someone shouted from across the playground, and Matilda, who was mesmerized by the whole crazy affair, saw Amanda Thripp descending into a long, graceful parabola onto the playing field beyond. She landed on the grass and bounced 3 times and finally came to rest. Then, amazingly, she sat up. She looked a trifle dazed, and who could blame her? But after a minute or so, she was on her feet again and tottering back towards the playground. The Trunchbull stood in the playground, dusting off her hands. "Not bad," she said, "considering I'm not in strict training. Not bad at all." Then she strode away. "She's mad," Hortensia said. "But don't the parents complain?" Matilda asked. "Would yours?" Hortensia asked. "I know mine wouldn't. She treats the mothers and fathers just the same as the children, and they're all scared to death of her. I'll be seeing you sometime, you two." And with that she sauntered away. Well done. We finished our session for today. Tomorrow we will continue reading and carry on making inferences. But for now, on your piece of paper or in your home learning book, you can predict what you think might happen next in the story.